In this video, we're going to look at how do you record journal entries, and we'll be using the rules of debit and credit. So what is the journal? The journal contains a chronological record of all the accounting transactions of a business. So everything that happens in the business each day, so making sales, paying for expenses, receiving cash, every transaction that happens gets recorded in the date order using the rules of debit and credit. So just to review, assets, expenses, and dividends all follow the same rules. When they increase, you record this on the debit side. When they decrease, it's on the credit side. Liabilities, capital, and revenue, when any of these increase, this will be recorded as a credit, and if any of these decrease, it will be recorded as a debit. So here is an example of what a journal will look like. So we have a column for the date. Sometimes the question doesn't give you the date, it just says number 1, number 2, so just put that there. Then we have the two accounts. So we have talked about how the accounting equation must always balance. And what we're going to show now is that the debits and the credits must always balance. So this means every time there is one accounting transaction, there has to be one account which is debited and one account which is credited. So when you write your journal entry, you'll write the debit first, and then you'll put the number into the debit column. And then underneath that, you'll leave a little space here, and then you'll write the credit, and you'll put the number into the credit column. And these two numbers should be equal. So please remember that the debit goes first, and you might remember that because the debit column is first. Underneath, I have a description of what this journal entry is about. So I like to think about recording journal entries with these steps here. So the first thing is when you read the question is to think about what are the two accounts that you can identify in the question. And once you know that, is that an asset or a liability? Is it equity, revenue, expense, or dividends? So every question you should know the two accounts, and it should belong to any one of these. Then you need to figure out, is the account increasing or decreasing? Once you know that, then you simply look at your rules of debit and credit to figure out which one is debit, which one is credit. So step 1 and 2 can be hard because you have to read and understand the question. Step 3 should be easy because you just follow the rules of debit and credit here. I'm going to do this example with you now, and this example comes from chapter 3 from your financial accounting textbook. So number 1, after registering the business name, Video Memories, the owner, deposited $15,000 into the business bank account. So first of all, we have $15,000. So this is going to be cash increasing in the business. All right. So cash. We know cash is a kind of asset. And if the cash is being deposited, this is going to be an increase. So cash will be my debit. I'm just going to type this with you. If you have a copy of this question, can you do it along with me? So cash is increasing. I put that into the debit. And I know underneath is going to be my credit, and we need to figure out, well, where did the cash come from? The cash has come from the owners. So this means the owner's equity in the business will increase. So have a look at the rules. Capital or owner's equity is increasing, and that is your credit. This is your contributed capital. So here is our answer. We have the debit first and the number into the debit column. Underneath is your credit and the number in the credit column. Okay, in the next question, Video Memories purchases 2 video cameras, which is equipment and supplies, and they paid cash. So let's look at the keywords here. I have equipment, I have supplies, and I have cash. So actually in this question I have 3 things. Now that's totally fine as long as the total debits will be equal to the total credits. Now what's interesting here is each one of these is an asset. They're all assets. So the next thing we need to figure out is which one is increasing and which one is decreasing. Now, if you purchase something, this is going to be an increase because when you purchase the equipment, it means you have more equipment in your business. If you purchase supplies, you have more supplies in the business. So equipment and supplies are both assets and they are both increasing. So let's have a look up here. For assets, when they increase, you record this as a debit. So let's write that down. We'll put the question number is question 2 and we'll write equipment and I'll put the amount into the debit column and underneath that I'm going to put the next debit and the number in the debit column. Now we look at the cash. It says paid cash. Okay, if you pay cash, which is an asset, this asset is decreasing. So have a look up here. When an asset decreases, this is recorded as a credit. So underneath my 2 debits, I'm going to put cash and I'm going to add up the total and put $10,000. So even though I have 2 debits, the total for those 2 debits has to equal the total for my credits. Okay, next one. Video Memories receives $1,500 immediately after filming a customer's wedding. So receives $1,500. This is receiving cash, and cash is an asset. So having a look at our rules, when we receive cash, cash is increasing. This will always be a debit. Where did the cash come from? We received the cash because we have been filming a customer's wedding. Filming a customer's wedding means you are giving a service to your customer, and this means we have earned revenue. So, filming a customer's wedding means revenue. Every time you earn revenue, the revenue is increasing. So let's have a look up here for revenue. Revenue is here. When you increase revenue, this will be a credit. Now, what you might have noticed is, of course, that's going to be credit because that's the space that I have left. There has to be 1 debit and there has to be 1 credit. So it's kind of a way you can check how you're going. There has to be 1 of each and it has to be equal. Number 4, Video Memories receives $2,000 to film a customer's wedding in a few weeks' time. So again, receiving cash. So you might see the pattern. We received cash in question 3. We received cash in question 4. Every time we receive cash, it's always going to be a debit. Now we just need to figure out what to do for the credit. So it says to film a customer's wedding in a few weeks' time. This means we haven't done the job yet. It means we owe the service to the customer. Okay, that is a liability when you owe something. The name of this liability is unearned revenue. Now, if we go up to our rules of debit and credit, here is liability. When the liability increases, this is always a credit. So when we owe more money or owe more services to the customer, the liability goes up. This will always be a credit. and that is the space I have. I'm going to write here unearned service revenue. Video Memories paid $250 in cash for Facebook advertising. So here I can see two things. I can see that there's cash and I can see that we have advertising. Now, cash is an asset. Advertising is an expense. So this question will have an asset and it will have an expense. Now we need to figure out which one is increasing or decreasing. So paid cash means your cash is decreasing. Having a look up here, cash is an asset, and every time you pay cash, this will be a credit. Okay, so I know the credit. I'm going to leave the space for my debit, and I'm going to write the credit in down here and put the number in the credit column. Then what is my debit? It has to be advertising expense, because that's the space I have. But let's check. Now, every time you pay for advertising, it means you have used that advertising, and that means that the total expenses in your business have increased. Every new expense you have is going to increase the total expenses in your business. So expenses are here, and every time an expense increases, this will be a debit for the business. The reason why expenses and dividends increase with a debit is because overall they will decrease your equity. Now, one thing to note here is that with expenses, you need to write the name of the expense. So you have to write advertising. If you have a business, you need to know what are the names of the different expenses that you have in your business. All right, I've done half the question now. Can you please pause the video and can you try and complete the rest? When you've finished it, can you come back and we'll go through the rest of the answers? Pause the video now. All right, let's continue through the rest and we can check and see how you did. Oh, this is being a little bit cheeky and not letting me write a 6 there. Okay. Video Memories films a dance competition, leaving a $3,500 invoice. So filming a dance competition means that you are giving the service to the customer, and so this is going to be revenue. And because you're filming the competition, your revenue is increasing. When revenue increases, this is always a credit. Now, leaving an invoice or a bill with the customer means that you haven't got the money yet. You're waiting for the money from the customer. So this is an asset, and the name of the asset is accounts receivable. Now, at this point, the accounts receivable is increasing because we're now waiting for that money from the customer. So if you look at the rules up here, here is an asset, the asset accounts receivable, and it's increasing, so accounts receivable is the debit. In number 7, we purchase another video camera. So we did this earlier where we called video camera the equipment. This is an asset and it is increasing. This time we did not pay for it. Instead, we owe the money. When you owe the money, that is a liability and it is increasing. So let's have a look up here at liability. Every time you owe more money, it means your liabilities are increasing, and this will be a credit for the business. And I'll record that credit and I'll write notes payable here. Don't forget to write the debit number and the credit amount as well. Okay, receiving cash from the customer in payment of the invoice from transaction 6. So this one here, and I'll highlight that a different colour, this one relates up here to transaction number 6. Now in transaction number 6, we recorded an accounts receivable for $3,500, and that means we were waiting to collect the money from the customer. Now down here in question 8, we are now receiving that cash from the customer. So the accounts receivable will decrease and cancel because we are now receiving the money from the customer. So the debit will increase the asset, accounts receivable, and so I'm going to do a credit to decrease and cancel the accounts receivable. Same number. Okay, now I'm also receiving cash. Cash is an asset. So having a look up here, an asset, every time I receive cash, I have more cash. Cash is increasing, so this will be a debit to cash. Notice that both of these are both assets. Cash is an asset and accounts receivable is an asset. In this case, one asset is increasing and the other asset is decreasing. So there's no change in total assets. The reason why is when we earned the revenue, we increased the revenue and we also increased the asset at the same time. So in question 8, we're just moving from one asset to another asset. In question 9, we pay salaries. These are our two key words. Pays means paying cash. What are we paying for? We're paying for an expense, our salary expense. So the cash will decrease. Let's have a look. Cash is an asset. Decrease is a credit. So this is going to apply anytime you pay cash. Every time you pay cash, it's always going to be a credit. And it might help if you just memorize cash because we have a lot of transactions with cash. So what you could memorize, and I'll write it down here, is that every time you receive cash, it will always be a debit. And anytime you pay cash, it will always be a credit. If you memorize that, that would really help you because so many of these journal entries have cash. Okay, back to number 9. We've paid cash, that's a credit. What do I write in the debit? What am I paying for? I'm paying for salary expense. Every time you pay for an expense, it means the total expenses in your business are increasing. So my expense is increasing and this will be a debit. So I'm going to write here, salary expense, 2,000. And last one, also paying cash. So I'm going to put cash in the credit side. And that leaves a space here for what did I pay for? I have paid for a dividend. And so I can put that in here, dividend. This means that the dividends in my business are increasing and dividends always increase with a debit. Recording journal entries takes practice. The best way to get confident with recording journal entries is practice, 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 repeat, repeat, repeat.